How important is it to pick the team? We've seen that inexperience sometimes gets quite costly for the team too. You've got to ensure that you have the balance of some senior players, mixing it up with some up-and-coming players, but at the end of the day, it needs to be performance-based, and to ensure that we do not uproot all senior players out and leave a group of inexperienced players, which could be quite hurtful for the team as a whole.
Absolutely. I'll use the business analogy again. I mean, successful businesses generally get that right, that you have experience, you have people that understand what the business environment looks like, you have people who model the behaviors, strategies, things you work to within a business. If you cleared all them out and just threw in some graduates from university, what would you get? You get a drop off in business. And performance. So rugby's no different, sport's no different. So part of the challenge is to navigate and plan and strategize around how you can introduce those youngsters into that environment. Talent alone is not enough in my book. That's not my quote, that's another person's quote. But for me, you've really got to understand that from a coaching perspective of how you can blend that. Another analogy is you're very much like the conductor of an orchestra, where you're not actually playing any instruments, but you're trying to pull people into those positions time and time again to give them the exposure that they need to be able to develop. The challenge with inexperience is it hasn't been honed. It's not at a stage where it understands that pressure and hasn't had the experience of that pressure and fatigue and stress that go on in the game. But the only way you're going to get there is by experiencing it. But it can bite you. And it's bitten me all through my career, because ultimately what I want to do is give individuals the opportunity to do that. But as good coaches would say, you do that with having some basis for what that individual, that newbie into the group can sort of elevate itself. I mean, I'll use one, which was, I remember in 2017 when we went to Hong Kong, and there was a young man called Masulami Kunavula, who was only 19, 20 at the time. And I look back on the videos, I've worked with him recently up in Edinburgh, and he was this long, thin man, but a great rugby player. And I can remember visiting his family just outside Singatoka, where his family were from, to say thank you very much on his selection and the sacrifices they put to him to get where they needed, and how humble they were. And they were farmers, and I can remember coming away just thinking they were beautiful people, and it was a wonderful place to grow up, very different to where I grew up. And then a week later, he's running out against 45,000 people in the stadium against South Africa in a final. And as a coach, you take heart from that. I didn't know how he was going to perform, and you know what? He could have got it wrong. But those are the gambles that you take, and ultimately, he had a great career as a sevens player, and he's gone on to be a professional player and played for 7 clubs. And that's one that went right, but I've had numbers of those that haven't been there. And your job as a coach is still to nurture, is still to provide opportunity for that individual to grow and learn. And some of those will become the best players in the world, and I'm sure even the best players in the world will probably be able to point to coaches who backed them and helped them and nurtured them and developed them, and when they made mistakes, gave them some objectivity to be able to understand how they could get better.
Vatemo Ravovo is making a comeback. He's been named in the Hong Kong team. Jerry Tuwai has said that he's trying his very best. It's been said that fitness will be the key, and where you stand at that. Definitely the Hong Kong team is not the team that's going to the Olympics. What's the plan going ahead for some of these senior players who's knocking on the door of selection?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I think that you'd have to speak to Osir about what that looks like in the future. But obviously, he has that selection dilemma. But Vatemo and Jerry have huge amounts of experience, as does Osir. And I think that if you have an ability to have a look at that and give them an opportunity to see where they can get to, I would say we would be foolish if we didn't have a look at that. Now, I can't tell you they're going to get there, and there's some hard realities of what they would have to be able to do to get to that point. The obvious challenge in that, as you get older, is that it gets harder to hit the fitness levels that are very obvious in sevens. and I look at Argentina, I look at Ireland, and look how they play, how quick they are around the field, the physicality they got. That's what you're going after all the time. However, what experience can do is it can give you another level of performance. And whether those players actually get to that point that they can play in an Olympics and have gone through that process, I don't necessarily, I know that some things have been made about Jerry proving his fitness. Yes, he has to do that. But, you know, he's done some wonderful things for this country. But ultimately, there's a level of performance that we can see and we understand that he's going to have to get to be able to make that experience count. So, you know, why wouldn't you look at that and see if it's available? And if it's not, if he doesn't get there, I think that what he can impart and what he can share with those younger players in the journey that they've got in 18 weeks could be the difference anyway.